All right, this is Epictetus, The Complete Works, Part 24. But what kind of contentment is it that can be obstructed by just anybody or anything? I'm not talking about Caesar or one of Caesar's friends, but a crow, a piper, a fever, and other things beyond number. But the chief characteristic of contentment is precisely that it isn't subject to interruptions or obstruction. Suppose that I'm now being called away to do something. Off I go, with the purpose of paying attention to the measures I ought to observe. That is, to ensure that I act with self-respect, securely, and without either desire or aversion for externals. Moreover, I also pay attention to other people, to see what they are saying and doing, not maliciously, not trying to find something to criticize or mock them for, but with the focus on myself, to see if I'm making the same mistakes. If you retain your equanimity, impenetrability, and composure, if you are the observer of events rather than the observed, if you're not envious of people who've been preferred to you, if you're not fazed by the material world, what is it that you lack? Books? How could you miss them? What would be the point? That's why the area you're intent on is also where you'll find obstacles. If you're dead set on having things that aren't up to you, you are bound to be impeded, obstructed, and unsuccessful. But if we were to read a treatise on inclinations, not to see what it is about the faculty of inclinations, but to manage our inclinations well. If we were to read a treatise on desire and aversion, so that our desires are never disappointed and our aversions effectively prevent the occurrence of things we want to avoid. If we were to read a treatise on acting appropriately in order to be mindful of our relationships with others, to make sure that we never act irrationally or improperly, then we wouldn't be annoyed if our reading is interpreted. We'd be satisfied to act accordingly, and we wouldn't reckon things up as we've been accustomed to in the past. Today, I read so many lines. Today, I wrote so many lines. But instead we'd say, today, I made use of my faculty of inclinations, as recommended by the philosophers. Today, I made no use of my faculty of desire, and I restricted my aversion to things that are subject to my will. I wasn't fazed by the person or put into a bad mood by that one. I practiced forbearance, patience, and amenability. And if we did that, we'd be thanking God for the things that demand our gratitude. If this is what God wants, so be it. Do you think that if Socrates had wanted to spend time in the Lyceum or the Academia and to converse every day with the young men of Athens, he'd surely have marched off to war as often as he did? Wouldn't he have moaned and groaned? Poor me, he'd have said. Here I am now, in a pitiful and miserable state, when I could be basking in the sun in the Lyceum. Was this your function, to bask in sunlight? Wasn't it to be content, unimpeded and unobstructed? How would he still have been Socrates if he moaned like that? How would he still have been able to compose hymns of praise in prison? In short, what you need to remember is that if you value anything that's external to your will, you will ruin your will. Not only is holding a public office external to will, but so too is not holding one. Not only business, but leisure too. Don't be hard to please. Don't be fussy about things. The wine's bad. It's got a sharp taste. The honey's bad. It upsets my stomach. I don't want vegetables. This is no different from I don't want leisure. It's empty space. Or I don't like a crowd. It's pandemonium. No, if circumstances force you to live alone or with just a few others, call it peace and quiet and make proper use of the situation. Talk to yourself. Work on your impressions. Apply yourself to your preconceptions. And if, on the other hand, you find yourself in the midst of a crowd, tell yourself it's an athletic meet, a festival, a celebration, and try to celebrate along with the rest. When someone loves humankind, what sight could please him more than a crowd of people? We enjoy seeing herds of horses or cows. The sight of a large number of ships put us in a good mood. Why should a person find the sight of large numbers of people disagreeable? But they deafen me with their shouting. So it's your hearing that's being obstructed. Why does that bother you? Your ability to make use of impressions isn't being obstructed as well, is it? If anyone stopping you from making use of desire and aversion and inclination and disinclination in conformity with your nature, is there any commotion that's capable of doing that? All you have to do is remember your general principles. What's mine? What isn't mine? What's up to me? What does God now want me to be doing? What does he not want me to be doing? A short while ago, he wanted you to be at leisure, to talk to yourself, write about these matters, read, attend lectures, and get yourself ready. You had enough time for that. Now he's saying to you, it's time for you to move on to the actual contest. Show us what you've learned and how successful your training has been. For how long will your exercise all be by yourself? Now it's time for you to find out whether you're the kind of athlete who deserves victory or the kind who travels around the world getting beaten. So why are you displeased? You can't have a contest without commotion. There are bound to be many trainers around, many people shouting, many overseers, many spectators. Don't you want to free yourself of all that? How do I go about that? Haven't you repeatedly been told that you mustn't completely eliminate desire? Direct your aversion only towards things that are subject to will, and let go of everything, your body, possessions, status, books, commotions, political power, and lack of political power. If you ever deviate from this path, you see you become a subservient slave, impeded, constrained, entirely dependent on others. No, you should have Cleanthes' words at hand. Lead me, Zeus, both you and destiny. Do you want me to be in Rome? Off I go to Rome. To Gyra? Off I go to Gyra. To Athens? Off I go to Athens. To prison? Off I go to prison. But if you ever think, when do I get to go to Athens? You're lost. At any rate, this desire, if unfulfilled, will certainly make you miserable, and if fulfilled, it will make you vain and proud of things in which you shouldn't take pride. And if you're again prevented from going, you'll be miserable because you're experiencing something you don't want to experience. So let go of all this. Well, Athens is beautiful, but far more beautiful are happiness, equanimity, serenity, and self-reliance. But contentment is worth all the difficulties. So if it's a time of difficulties, why not eliminate your aversion toward them? Why must you bear your burden like a donkey being beaten with a stick? Can't you see that otherwise you'll inevitably and always be the slave of anyone who's able to bring relief or create all sorts of obstacles for you? You'll have to consolate him as you would a spirit of bad luck. There's only one path that leads to contentment, and this is a thought you should have at hand, morning, noon, and night, and that is to renounce things that aren't subject to will, to think of none of them as yours, to surrender your whole life to the gods and fortune, to entrust the guardianship of your life to them, seeing that they were in fact created by Zeus for that purpose, and to focus exclusively on what's up to you and unimpeded. With this goal as the point of all your reading, writing, listening to lectures. That's why I find it impossible to call a person hardworking if I hear only that he reads and writes. Even if I'm also told that he stays up all night, I still can't call him that without knowing what his purpose is. You wouldn't call someone hardworking if he stays awake at night over a girl, and by the same token, I withhold the title too. If it's fame that keeps a person awake, I call him ambitious. And if it's money, I call him avaricious, but not hardworking. On the other hand, if a person makes his command center the point of all his efforts, with his with the intentions of keeping it in accord with nature throughout his life, then and only then I call him hardworking. After all, you should never praise or blame people for things that they may be either good or bad, but for their judgments. These actions belong to a person, and it is they that make his actions wrong or right. Bearing all this in mind, enjoy what you have and welcome whatever the moment brings. If you see any of the matters you've studied, researched, presenting themselves to you to be put into practice, that should please you. If you've eliminated or reduced the malicious and abusive aspects of your character, your impetuousness, your use of foul language, your aimlessness, and inconsistency, and if the things that used to move you leave you unmoved or less moved than you were before, you're in a position to celebrate a festive every day. Today, because you did well in one particular set of circumstances, tomorrow because you'll do the same in another. How much better a reason this is for a sacrifice than a consulship or governorship. You have yourself and the gods to thank for these qualities. Just remember in whose gift they are and what kind of people receive them and why. If you acquire the habit of thinking like this, will you still be uncertain when to find happiness and where? You have to be pleased God wherever we are. Aren't we all inquiescent from God? Wherever we are, don't we all equally see his works? Okay, that's a good point to stop this video.